Happy 2025, everybody. I hope you had a good holiday. Welcome to No Script, No Problem on Believe, the #1 podcast network for professionals. I'm your host, Steve Berkowitz. As always, we'll be diving into the world of television, movies, and documentaries, as well as the ever-changing landscape of the entertainment industry. Today, I'm talking to Sam Restivo. He's the phenomenal co-editor of the hit action sequel Gladiator II. This is his 5th time working with legendary director Ridley Scott. Can't wait for you to hear my interview with Sam. But first, here is your reality check. All right, Netflix had their big 2 games that they broadcast on Christmas Day. We talked a couple weeks ago about their efforts to get into live sports. They started off with the Jake Paul-Mike Tyson so-called fight, which was a disaster. It was a horrible fight, if you want to call it that. And then you had all of the kinks that went into the broadcast. Some people couldn't see it. I had issues with the stream. I know lots of people did, but they celebrated with the big number. They announced 65 million people had watched around the world, and so that's all you heard was this Netflix celebrating the number. But Christmas Day, you got the NFL. 2 huge NFL games, including Chiefs and Steelers, which has playoff implications. So no room for error. Well, Netflix is celebrating.
And the numbers are in. The streamers' 2 Christmas Day football games broke records. The matchup between the Kansas City Chiefs and Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens win over the Houston Texans have become the most streamed NFL games in history. That's according to Nielsen numbers, reported upwards of 24 million for each game.
Now, while the media and lots of folks who maybe aren't NFL fans are drooling over Netflix and praising them for pulling off 2 flawless NFL broadcasts and an amazing Beyonce halftime show, it's Beyonce, so of course she's flawless. Almost everybody is forgetting to mention some very important details here. CBS Sports produced these 2 football games, and NFL media produced the pregame, post-game, and studio halftime programming, not Netflix. And as for the impressive Beyonce halftime show, that was produced by Jesse Collins Entertainment, who produces all of the Super Bowl halftime shows. The on-air talent, broadcasters, reporters, etc., came from CBS, Fox, ESPN, the NFL Network, and FanDuel. While Netflix is getting all of the credit, we basically just watched 2 CBS games with rented talent from other networks. And that is pretty much the Netflix playbook, if you think about it. Borrow all the good stuff from everyone else and repackage it as their own, and then take all the credit. They convince viewers that somehow what you're watching is new and special. And while the numbers are undoubtedly impressive, they're not actually as good as last year. In 2023, 28.68 million viewers watched the Raiders and Chiefs on CBS. The Giants-Eagles game attracted 29.02 million on Fox. And the Ravens 49ers drew 27.61 million on ABC and ESPN. Now, of course, we all know streaming is the future, but we shouldn't start declaring Netflix the king of live sports programming just yet. As for the NBA ratings, which are way down so far this season, they had a rebound on Christmas Day with a much-needed holiday hoops bump over their 5-game annual extravaganza. And this comes despite the competition with the NFL. The league said it posted its most watched Christmas Day slate in 5 years, with an average of 5.25 million viewers across its 5 games on ABC, ESPN, ESPN2, Disney Plus, and ESPN Plus. That reportedly adds up to a viewership increase of 84% against last year's Christmas. If the games are competitive and fans know where to find them, and if the stars stay healthy and the players please stop jacking up so many ridiculous threes, the ratings will go back up. Now, if you watch Amazon Prime Video, surely you have seen the thumbnail for Mr. Beast's Beast Games reality show / game show. Mr. Beast is the world's most popular YouTuber, and he and his team have been predicting they would break all records for reality shows. There have been a lot of negative kind of press previously, with lawsuits and complaints about how contestants were treated, etc. And with that, because there was a lot of hoopla about the $5 million prize and this award of a private island, I think people wanted to see what it was going to be. According to The Guardian, quote, YouTuber Mr. Beast's obnoxious Squid Game imitation, which is currently being sued by contestants, is ugly, tasteless TV. It's as grimly compelling as picking a scab, unquote. Other reviews are pretty harsh, declaring it, quote, exploitative, end quote. But those are just reviews. We will see if it breaks into the top streaming shows over the next month, and then we'll see ultimately if it gets renewed for a season 2. Mr. Beast allegedly put in $100 million of his own money, and Amazon outbid everybody for this, so they clearly put in a lot of money. So all that will play into whether it gets renewed. And the reason I say that is the real benchmark for whether a show's success is because when you look at the greatest reality shows and game shows of all time, Survivor is coming up on season 48. Yes, season 48. Amazing Race is about to air season 37. And even currently, if you don't want to talk about the old school shows, Love is Blind is on season 7. And it is the most popular unscripted show in the world. Love is Blind was watched for 6 billion minutes in the month of March 2024. That is according to Nielsen. A surge in streaming that followed the 6th season release on February 14th of 2024. The season was among the top 10 most watched Netflix shows for the 5 weeks after it premiered. So, sure, Beast Games has broken a few world records like largest cash prize given away and most contestants ever in a game show, but let's see if it can get to a season 3, 4, or 5. Moving on, a few weeks ago we talked about AI and how it's affecting the entertainment industry. Well, now we know it is really affecting the entertainment industry and how it's doing so. According to The Atlantic's article on November 18th, an investigation by the outlet has discovered a database that has powered AI training datasets for companies like Apple, Anthropic, Meta, Nvidia, Salesforce, Bloomberg, and more. This database is comprised of over 53,000 movies and 85,000 TV episodes. The article said this includes hundreds of episodes of The Simpsons, Seinfeld, Twin Peaks, The Wire, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and every Best Picture nominee between 1950 and 2016. So far, there is virtually no response from any big Hollywood studios. Whereas the New York Times has sued OpenAI, there are no major lawsuits filed by Netflix, Disney, Paramount, or Warner Brothers Discovery. After spending months on strike against the movie and TV studios in terms of how they might use artificial intelligence in 2023, the Writers Guild of America is now calling on those studios to wake up and take action against how tech companies have been using AI. Hello? The WGA East and West sent a joint letter on Wednesday, December 11th to top Hollywood CEOs at Warner Brothers Discovery, Paramount Global, Disney, NBC Universal, Sony, Netflix, and Amazon MGM Studios, demanding that the studios take, quote, immediate legal action, end quote, against any tech company that is using WGA members' work to train its AI models. All of this referring back to the Atlantic article. The Atlantic article makes the case that the technology in chatbots and text-to-video generators like Runway and Sora creates striking facsimiles of speech and visuals, in part because they're directly trained on Hollywood materials. Tech companies have posited that their material is open sourced and comes from publicly accessible data. but the dialogue that powers some of the models is often drawn from closed captions on YouTube videos and other sources rather than the original source material directly. So the WGA's response, rather than shout at studios to simply ban AI in films and TV altogether, is to make the case that this is greatly hurting the business of the studios themselves, with AI companies stealing the intellectual property that they own and plagiarize it in order to create their models. They believe the studios shouldn't be silent on the issue any longer. I agree, but I don't think the studios are going to do anything, same as they've done nothing about YouTube stealing their work, and the result has been a disaster. All right, let's get to my interview now with Sam Restivo. This guy is super talented, and he is the perfect example of what can happen when you work your ass off, master a technical skill like editing, make good contacts, and work your way up the ladder. Sam Restivo is the co-editor of Gladiator II, a sequel to the Academy Award-winning Gladiator. He also cut Napoleon with frequent collaborator Claire Simpson. Both of these films are directed by the one and only Ridley Scott. You know, same guy who directed Alien, American Gangster, Prometheus, The Martian, and Black Hawk Down. In the interview, we dig into Sam's career, how he became a film editor, and the making of Gladiator II. Plus, we talk a little bit about AI. Enjoy. All right, Sam, welcome to No Script, No Problem. Thanks for doing the show, brother.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Happy to be here.
Gladiator II, epic saga. Dude, congratulations on cutting this amazing film. 5th time collaborating with the legend Ridley Scott. Okay, Sam, let's just take a step back from Gladiator 2. We'll talk about that. I'm excited to talk about that. Sure. You're from Wharton, Texas. Take me back. How do you get into movies? How do you get into film? Well, take me back. What's that first moment where you're like, oh my God, I love this stuff?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I was born in Wharton, Texas, in a very tiny town that the hospital's not even there anymore. You know, when people ask me where I'm from, I generally say Houston because that's where I went to high school. And it was when I was in high school that I tried to take movies seriously. Like I'd always been a gigantic movie fan as a child. I remember the first time I went to the movies in 1984 and saw Ghostbusters. My mom took me to it, and I was terrified even as a 4-year-old because the first scene's kind of scary. But I was always attracted back to it. And then when I was in high school, I'd started doing like plays and like acting. But then I saw Michael Mann's Heat in 1995. That was actually a formative moment where I was like, oh, wait, I want to do this as a career. And I had somehow convinced my parents to let me go to film school in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University. And, with the intention to, most of us back then, it was about being a director, right? That's why we went to film school. In college, I, learned all the various things. And I'd always been somebody that was, kind of into editing. I should say into the tech side of things. Because when I was in high school and editing like short films or making short films, I was using 2 VCRs and a camcorder. Like I figured out how to do it. I mean, this is in the, Avid was not something that was really available for consumers at that point. So that's what I was doing in high school. And then in college, my sophomore year, which was the first year I was getting to make movies in the production classes on Super 8 film, no less. A friend down the hallway, her mom worked at Apple, and she flat out just gave me Final Cut Pro 1.0, which was like $1,000 software in 1999. And so as soon as I actually had a computer that could run it, I was kind of off and running on the editorial side, or at least my mind was more there. And then when I got out of school, one of my best friends was a couple of years older, so he'd already been out in the workforce, was working on Michael Mann's Collateral, actually. And there was another spot for a post-production assistant. And I was like desperate to be like, I just want to get on a movie. It doesn't matter to me. I don't care. And he was like, this is going to be the hardest job of your entire life. And he's correct. So like I got that gig, and that the whole career started at that point where it job to job to job. And I basically was able to stay in editorial because that's where I really found my like passion for it. And it was a perfect niche for me at the beginning of my career.
That is very cool that seeing Michael Mann's Heat inspired you to go down this path, and then you get to PA on Michael Mann's Collateral. What is it about the Michael Mann style, those two movies, that you love?
And obviously I've seen all of Michael's films, and I'm very, very grateful that I had the opportunity to get to work there, especially early in my career. But stylistically, it's visual, like the use of color and the moving camera was really, really awesome to me. And it's just, such a visceral thing. The bank robbery scene in Heat is just one of the craziest things that I've ever seen in any movie. And it's funny though. I mentioned this frequently, that Heat is the one that did it, and my wife points out, like a lot of people love that movie, but it can at times be a paean to toxic masculinity, and I'm very, very aware of that. But like I can honestly say, in the movie theater in '95, like I was just like pinned to my seat. It was the most riveting thing from from the opening shot even of the train coming to court camera. It's just like, oh wow, this is going to be something amazing. And so to get to work with him a few times, because I did Collateral and Miami Vice and on the TV series Luck, it's just crazy. Now, these were extremely challenging jobs. On Collateral, at least, there was at the time, a 24-hour cutting room, which is kind of a preposterous notion, where it's like, oh, we gotta work around the clock for this on this movie. But as a 23-year-old straight out of college, it was a truly valuable professional work experience to understand what it's like working on movies. And I had to grow up real fast, basically. And so there was a lot of pain and suffering involved. And I wouldn't necessarily wish that on others, but I would say it was a formative experience for me. I'm way better as a professional simply for having survived that experience.
My knowledge of that editorial world comes from unscripted, from reality TV, documentaries, which, has changed over the years, but you become an assistant editor, and that role has changed, I'm sure, in the scripted side as well, but, was kind of a training ground to become an editor, now has a lot of much more of a technical element to it. How did your path go from, being a PA to then getting to where you're at today as an editor on big, huge feature films?
Yeah, so that is a fabulous question, because that is a common thing. Because I haven't worked in unscripted, but many friends of mine have, and the technician side of being an assistant editor is a whole thing, and it is also on features and scripted television. And because I was always tech-minded, I leaned into learning how to use the Avid very strongly, like as soon as I was getting assistant editor jobs, which I should back up real quick. Like I was a PA for years, for like probably 3 or 4 years, and did multiple shows, and I wanted to get in the union. There could be kind of a roadblock there. They want to, there's a lot of people that are frequently out of work that are in the union, and they want to give priority to those folks versus those just trying to break in. And that's why, there's a few hoops you got to jump through. And I ended up, I worked on a non-union film and basically got my days that way to get in as an assistant editor. But anyway, doing independent movies where you don't have help, like I didn't have assistant editors or any of that kind of stuff on any of the indie features that I cut. So you learn how to do absolutely everything from a technical perspective, and that informs how to be an assistant editor on big shows. And I was always just really good at that. But the thing was, how do you transition between, moving from just being the technical side to the creative side, right? And it took many years, probably 15 or so years before I was working on shows and editors would give me a chance to cut something. Now, mentally, there's a skill that has to be, created or evolved, which is when you're doing the assistant work, it's a real, a tech side, and you're like, wait, I can't function with the creative side because I'm too busy, kind of come up with a turnover schedule or something like that, or to, do a change list or something. But I had to cultivate that skill of being like, okay, I know how to do the assistant stuff like the back of my hand. I could do it with my eyes closed so that I could focus exclusively on the creative side. There was a brief time where I was working on The Walking Dead, filling in for a friend, and I was working with one of the top editors, Kelly Dixon, who I'd worked with before on Luck, and she was like, here, take this scene and do this. And it was one of the first times an editor had given me the chance, and I was kind of freaked out. I was like, oh, I don't even know what to do, and I threw myself into it and probably didn't do the best job, and she was like, listen, this is just the beginning. You're learning how to do this thing, so be patient with yourself. And I was like, oh, I really appreciated that. And then after that, I was very fortunate to get to work with this legendary editor named Joe Hutching, who cut things like JFK and Born on the 4th of July and Almost Famous. Joe would give me more scenes, and I would get better at doing that thing because I still had to be an assistant editor, but I was relishing these opportunities to get to try to do something creative. Long way around of getting to the point where I'm finally working on the Ridley Scott films with another legendary editor, Claire Simpson. Claire and I, the first collaboration was on this TV series that Ridley did called Raised by Wolves. And Claire and I kind of hit it off personally, like right away. We have a lot of similar interests and we like the same kind of movies and all that. And she gave me opportunities right away to start cutting. And I knew this was my opportunity. I have to just do the thing. And I'm so incredibly grateful and fortunate for her giving me that opportunity. And she liked what I did. She would give me feedback. I would do it. And then she got comfortable with like, we can show Ridley this scene. And then eventually she would just let me sit with Ridley on the stuff that I did. Our collaboration blossomed from there, where I got to do a little bit more on The Last Duel and got additional editor. And then House of Gucci was even more, to the point where on Napoleon, she let me share the duties fully. And then also on Gladiator II.
Tell me a little bit about that partnership or that collaboration with another editor, because I'm sure, it's a tricky balance between, well, this is, specifically Claire's a little bit more senior.
Yep.
And it's, well, is this my film? Is this my show? How do you two balance, your style has to be the same once the film actually comes out. It has to be seamless, but yet you're both creatives. So how do you guys balance that?
Right. So, if Claire were here, she would be open and honest, and she would say that it's an egalitarian kind of system where we share the things equally, and that's true to a point. But honestly, this is Claire Simpson, one of the best film editors we've ever had. I'm going to follow her lead always, and that was the case with Joe Hutching as well. These are the best in the business. I value their insights at all times. And so I out of pure respect, Claire is kind of the boss between the two of us. And that's how it should be. Now, she is completely open to any ideas that I have always. And I appreciate that. But there's no substitute for the A level of expertise, and then B, the skill and talent level that someone like she has, with 45 years of experience as an editor. So when it comes down to on the day, who does what scene, we're both kind of, she goes first, basically what scene that she wants. And then she'll be like, well, what do you feel about this one? I'm happy to. And an early experience that was pretty awesome for me on Napoleon at the very beginning, because the Battle of Waterloo was up pretty early in the schedule. I think that was maybe week 2, and she was like, "Hey, listen, I'd really like for you to take this one on and get this one going," because it was a massive sequence, and I really appreciated her trust in me to take a shot at that, and it was it was a blast. And no, we've got the best working relationship and friendship imaginable. So it's a dream to get to work with someone like her.
Is Claire the one who kind of made the introduction with Ridley, or how did you kind of get into the camp to where you're at now, where you're part of Team Ridley?
It's fascinating. So our crews are really small, surprisingly. So when we were doing Raised by Wolves, the first thing that I did with them, now granted, I got that job. This is a really random thing. When I was still on Facebook, I was in a kind of exclusive assistant editors group with some friends from other high profile shows. I had just finished working with Joe because he had kind of decided to retire. I saw there was a job post, first assistant editor, Ridley Scott, Claire Simpson, sci-fi TV series, South Africa. Send your resumes to wherever. And I was like, let's do it. I was looking for something, and I love to travel, and was up for it. So I sent the resume to the person who ended up being the post producer, who reached back out to me. And by the way, she saw that I was from Horton, Texas, on my IMDb, and she's from Texas as well. And so that was a first connection. And then so with Claire, Joe Hutching used to be her assistant on Wall Street in 1987. And so there was a connection there. But anyway, I got the job because we got along right away. And once we started working, since it's such a small crew, and I'm really good on the Avid, my skills on operating the system are pretty peak, and they're very fast. And at that time, Ridley liked to come every day after the shoot to editorial to come and watch dailies with us. And Claire wanted to like sit next to him and have a notepad. And I was the one operating the Avid. And since like even on that show, we were doing like, I don't know, 5 or 6 cameras on absolutely everything. And knowing how to toggle through things at the speed at which he wants to like watch stuff is a whole thing. And I was really adept at it like immediately. And so he appreciated that from the technical side. And then once Claire had started giving me opportunities to edit stuff, he was like open to, you know, my perspective on things, on how to cut these scenes and the type of the shots to use. And, you know, he's obviously got a plan for what he wants. I mean, he storyboards every frame of every show by hand himself, but he likes to be also surprised by what the editors bring to it, because he doesn't want it to get stale for him, because when things go exactly according to plan, it ultimately is kind of boring. Actually, it became this kind of natural collaboration that came out of just, you know, the smallness of our team and the trust that Claire already had in me just translated easily to him. So that it was at the end of House of Gucci that Claire was like, Sam, I would like to share the duties with you on this one. And I'm going to, you know, champion you to Ridley. And actually, I heard her ask him if that was okay, that the day she did it. And he was like, absolutely, of course, that sounds fantastic. So it's kind of mind blowing, this whole experience to get to this point. But yeah, gonna keep riding this train as long as they'll have me, basically.
I think that's great advice for anybody listening, to master that tech side.
Yep.
And tell me if you disagree, but mastering that kind of tech side and then being able to thrive on the creative side. Would you agree?
100%. And that's what it was. And it's not like I didn't know that at the beginning. It's just, I didn't want to disappoint people. I wanted to be good at the job, and I wanted to keep getting hired and stuff. So that there is the technical side of it, but then there's also just the personality side of it, of treating people with respect and being a nice person and a positive influence in the cutting room. And like on those early jobs, the Michael Mann stuff, and I was like a PA. I mean, I was just, you know, making coffee for people and picking up lunches and going on runs and stuff, because that's what they needed out of me. You know, it's funny to look back then, and like Collateral was a really stressful show for everybody. But thinking about what the editors of that movie, Jim Miller and Paul Rubel, they're incredibly stressful jobs that those guys have. So the thing that you can bring to it, if you're, you know, a young assistant, is just make their day a little bit better by, like, you know, oh, what do you need? Can I help with something? And it's as simple as that. And being like a kind person, not like a fake person or something, and not, you know, be enthusiastic, but not overly enthusiastic. And just being a good force meant that, like, when that show ended, you know, and you got to look for another job, I'd called up, or I'd been texted one of the assistant editors that was on Collateral. And I was like, oh, hey, what's you got going on? Oh, well, actually, Paul Rubel is doing this Michael Bay movie. Are you interested? And I was like, yeah, of course. And it was like, oh, right, Sam was nice. We liked him. He was cool. Like, and that's all it took, really. And that, you know, I did the job, did the things that they asked for. So it was a combination of learning the tech side and then just being a good worker that, you know, I kind of just, you know, kept going, basically, and knew that hopefully an opportunity would come for me someday.
All right, Gladiator II. Here we go. This is like an epic challenge, because the original wins the Academy Award. It's got such acclaim, and the nostalgia for folks like me, you know, Gen X. Tell me about the stress you feel as you're there on set, you're seeing it, and then you know that you get the dailies coming in and you start the cutting process. Is there a level of stress cutting Gladiator II that maybe you didn't feel on some of the previous projects?
Well, so for me, it was actually kind of the reverse. So Napoleon was the one where I felt the stress immediately, because this was them giving me an opportunity to sit in the big chair and go for it on these gigantic scenes with a really big budgeted, high pressure production. And so with Gladiator, so I saw the first film the day it came out. I was in film school, you know, May 5th of 2000. I went to the Cinerama Dome with another buddy of mine. And I didn't really know what I expected at the time, but it blew me away. And, you know, it's one of my favorite movies. It's my mom's favorite movie of all time. And so when it happened now we always knew there was in the background percolating, maybe going to do a Gladiator sequel, but I was like, yeah, we'll see it. And then it was, you know, maybe halfway through Napoleon, he was like, this is going to be the next one. I was super excited. So by the point that I just couldn't wait for us to get to Morocco is where we started. I just couldn't wait to get going on it because I knew it was going to be something crazy. And once we had read the script, you're like, okay, I got it. Sharks in the Coliseum. We're doing it. I was fully embracing the challenge of it. And it was a gigantic challenge, even from week one in Morocco. We were only going to be in Morocco for a couple of weeks, but they had scheduled both the opening Numidian battle and then the baboons fight were both week one. And so that meant that Claire and I were just going to have to like divvy the stuff up and go. And she took on the baboons and I took on the Numidian battle. And it was just kind of like a sprint for a time because they work at such a breakneck pace on the set. Like they're hurtling through locations and sequences and actors and all this stuff that we frequently get calls from production, the next day being like, hey, do we have it all? Can we move on? Can we strike this set? To say nothing of Ridley, wanting to like see the cuts and stuff. So my attitude, I would say, was that excitement once I got to see this stuff. And like, so Numidian battle, it's like, it's, this gigantic wall from Kingdom of Heaven, ironically enough, is still there in Ouarzazate in Morocco. And they were using that with these gigantic boats made by Arthur Mack's production designer, and then Neil Corbell, the special effects supervisor. These like massive boats on the desert, and then visual effects is going to like add water and stuff. But they got all these guys fighting hand-to-hand combats, swords and bows and arrows. Like, are you kidding? And 12 cameras. So like, I have all of the options always. It wasn't stressful as much it was fun for me.
Okay, so the Numidian battle coming out of the gates, opening up the film was a great way to kind of like just get you back into the action. Like as a fan, I was like, okay, we're doing this. Yep. Tell me a little bit about, like you said, 12 cameras. Tell me about making those kind of decisions. Is this a process where Ridley wants to see what you can do from a creative standpoint? Or do you know in the back, you've worked with Ridley a lot, you kind of know what he wants and you don't want to mess around. You don't have the time. You want to just give this man what he wants.
Like we said, he storyboards every frame. Well, he storyboards a lot of stuff that's in his head, and that usually translates to the A and the B and maybe the C camera. But then there's obviously like up to 12, and it's just, he's over walkie-talkie. He's kind of directing these other camera operators to like, oh no, reframe the shot to do this thing and whatnot. So he's figuring it out as he goes anyway, beyond the storyboards themselves. And what my approach when cutting it is, I always lean toward, because usually a camera is probably the most interesting shot or the main shot that he wants. But then just intuitively, like what looks the coolest, like what's the most fun looking composition that he's got going there. Because obviously, even when you have 12 cameras, you can only use one of them at a time. I lean toward what I had seen that from his drawings, meaning he wants to emphasize this thing. So I use that, but then my own taste for what I liked with those scenes, like what I liked in big action movies and the kind of stuff that like, I didn't want to overcut it, as in like having, shots that don't even last a second or whatnot. You're still trying to tell the story and have it be paced properly with the right tension. And then, so my initial cut of that sequence was probably something like 20 plus minutes long, which to open the movie is too much. Like, there's just too much and the audience is going to be exhausted. I would show Claire and she's like, yes, this is good. We've got a good footprint of what this is going to be. And, and then Ridley's like, yeah, when he finally saw it, he was like, oh, okay, I got it. It's there. We love it. We're gonna squeeze it down and make it into something more manageable. And I think in the final show, it's something like 12 minutes or so, and it's the perfect kind of way to get the audience excited to start the movie.
As an editor, you hate the phrase "we'll fix it in post."
Yeah.
How much are you and Claire on set going, hey, can we grab that cutaway? Can we get that insert? Like, how much are you guys really making sure that you have everything that you need that first time around so that you're not having to spend the money to go back and get pickups?
Right. So it's a testament to the power of the team that Ridley has assembled around him. He's worked with a lot of these people for many years, and they are the best at what they do. It's rare that the notion of like fixing it in post, that's a very common thing. And I get it. I've had it on many shows. It's not really like that on the Ridley shows, even though there are always problems and you have to solve these problems. It's rarely because some department, dropped the ball. It's never that. Having said that, he is always open to, he checks in with us every day during the shoot about do we need something else? Do we need something else? And especially with someone like Claire's experience, she knows exactly what we need. He's always open to, you know what? I guess I should get an insert of this one thing. Or do you like how I covered this particular thing? And he's always open to our feedback. And that translates into like the special effects guy, Neil, is like, oh yeah, you guys want some more Numidians getting skewered by the scorpion arrows? Let's do it, man. And he and like 5 guys will go and just mock this thing up and just do it for us. And a great example that I remembered from Napoleon was that when we did the Battle of Austerlitz, which is the one in the ice that takes place halfway through the movie, there was a question from a budgetary and logistical standpoint of, were we going to be able to do an underwater tank shoot with the Austrian army falling into the water? And production was thinking maybe we don't need those shots and just stay topside. But Claire and I were like, no, that's the whole thing. That we need those shots. That was super important. And we convinced Ridley, not that he needed convincing, he knew he wanted to do it. It's just we needed to show a strong opinion about it to the producers, and we got it. And the shots of the cannonballs going underwater and the guys falling in is like the best thing in that sequence, and it makes it. So there is generally an openness from Ridley for our perspective on what is actually needed to solve these scenes.
Tell me a little bit about cutting some of these big Coliseum scenes that are, that's what everybody was waiting for, the Coliseum scenes.
Right. So each of the times when you're working with like CGI animals, for example, the visual effects perspective is daunting. And that's part of why they put baboons up front, because that was the most complicated one, because these are very ornate creatures, and we're going to have close-ups of them. The skin needed to look correct. The hair needed to look correct. And so Claire, when putting together the baboons, it's wild, the various types of plates and the types of photography that we needed to get on that. So they had these incredible stunt performers in these gray suits, and they had makeup on their faces, and they're the ones that directly interacted with Paul Mescal playing Lucius. And those guys' performance are awesome. Like they're doing the physical thing. They've got stilts on their arms so that they've got the movement correct, and they're throwing themselves around the arena, and they're giving like a facial performance as well. So Paul has something to respond to, and it's great. And so Claire's cutting with that, and then also visual effects was wanting a pass where they had like a puppet baboon that Connor, the prosthetics guy, created for the really close up shots, like when he bites the baboon's arm. They had this like puppet thing that was incredible. That's on top of a guy in a blue suit, like a blue screen suit. And then also visual effects wanted completely clean plates with just Paul and nobody else. So, and because Paul Mescal is such an incredible actor, he threw himself way into this. So he's like throwing himself around this empty arena and like knocking himself in the head and flying back. It's an incredible performance. So with putting that sequence together, that was a serious challenge to kind of make sense of what it looks like, because it's going to be ages before we actually have the baboons in there. So there's a lot of using your imagination and direct contact with the visual effects people to be like, okay, this plate is meant for exactly what now? And we were getting these things turned over right away to get, well, we call it post-viz, not pre-viz, but post-viz, where they can do kind of quick, rough and dirty animations to approximate where things are and how it's going to look. And then finally to the vendor. And in any of the animals case, it was always Frame Store that did those, that they would get to work on it right away. And almost weekly, we were seeing updates to what it was going to look like. Now, that was the baboons. The rhino actually was a different process, and it was kind of even more insane. So Neil in special effects and in collaboration with Connor and prosthetics, they created this 3D printed rhino skin on top of like it's kind of like a like a cherry picker, basically, like this little real mobile remote control golf cart thing that had a bunch of wheels, and they put a rhino skin on top of it with a saddle for the actor playing Galacio to like ride on it, and it would kind of like respond to him. It had hydraulics, so it moved around like an alive thing, and inside the Coliseum, and all the actors had something to act to then, and they could remote control this thing on wheels, and it would be flying at these dudes. And I remember some of the early takes looking at Paul Mescal's reaction, like, between action and cut, and he was like, holy shit, this is insane, like kind of laughing at him because it's so nuts, and it plays so well for like the believability of the actors in that moment. Like the shot where the guy is getting chased by the rhino, there's a rhino chasing him there, and so he had something to go on. And so with that, I mean, again, and we also had 9 to 10 cameras on everything. So anything we were looking for as editors, we usually had, including like big wide shots, drone shots and stuff. And then people in the royal box that are reacting to it. It was always an embarrassment of riches with that kind of stuff. And then same with the sharks in the Coliseum. So obviously that was shot, on dry land, right? And that sequence was shot at 3 different times where they did a stuntman pass, and then they did like a close-up pass with Paul, and then there was a tank shoot for like guys falling in water and stuff. And so that sequence, more than any of the others, took the longest for us to make work, just because we got all the pieces at different times. And then also water is probably the hardest thing visual effects has to do. Like comparatively, the sharks are pretty easy because it's it's mostly underwater, and there really aren't that many of them. But the full CG water things are a serious challenge for VFX. So there was always a little bit of pressure for us to like get this stuff assembled as fast as possible from their perspective. But like as editors, again, it's all just a dream. We were enjoying getting to go in any direction we wanted to keep it fun and keep it interesting and exciting.
The other dream, I'm sure, was, you've got Denzel Washington
Yep.
and Pedro Pascal, not to mention Paul, like you said. Denzel, obviously one of the greatest actors ever. Tell me a little bit about making some of these editorial choices with Denzel.
Yeah, are you kidding? He's the ultimate combination of true professional actor and movie star. On the one side, he's so experienced and he's such a pro that he's making the words be alive for him in the moment. So like he's trying to do something interesting every single take. So it's a little bit different. He's making different choices, leaning one way or another, but also he is so magnetic. He's just ultimately watchable in everything that he does. And so it was a blast to get to do scenes with him. Like I did a few of the early scenes with him and Paul together, like when he's talking about what he looks for in Gladiators, and he's alive on screen. And I don't know, that stuff is pretty simple too. I mean, dialogue scenes are actually in a way harder than action scenes, and Claire would say the same, just because you got to make strong story choices. Like it's one thing to keep, action moving at a certain pace. There's something kind of rhythmic about that, where it's a different rhythm when you're dealing with dialogue and we're dealing with emotion, and how long to stay on a person for their nonverbal reaction. Because I personally find the nonverbal stuff is often the most interesting and the most telling and the most revealing of character. And with someone like Denzel, who's a consummate professional in understanding his own physicality, that's just being on him when he's not talking is awesome. And we, even in some of the action scenes when he's sitting in the royal box watching, we always knew we could go to him for a reaction that's like really, that's giving his reading is something really, really interesting. And it's such a blast. And the stuff with him and like Threx, the devious senator, is such a blast. Like because Tim McInerney, who played Threx, is a really experienced actor as well. And the two of them together, just they knew what they were doing and they just went for it. And so cutting those scenes was like so much fun. And then we were just trying to ultimately, find out of the whole picture of what the movie is. We wanted the pacing to be consistent and not too far one way or the other, and have the right balance of action plus emotion plus mystery. And when you have these top performers like him, and I should also say about Connie Nielsen specifically, she's kind of, for us, she was like the beating heart of the movie, because she was the one that tied you directly to the first film, and is the one that was doing a lot of the emotional heavy lifting for a time, because she's the one that's longing for the reconciliation with her son, and he won't give it to her. With Connie, that was a blast as well, because we knew she's bringing so much emotion in every single take. We had to figure out how to modulate just the right amount of it. So we didn't want to have too much emotion, didn't want to have enough, too little, and she was always giving us something good to go for in those scenes. So pros like the two of them, and then also Pedro as well. I mean, hell, my one of my favorite things in the movie is when he goes into the arena for his battle scene, the tracking shot behind him into the Coliseum, which is it's a play on one from the first movie. I was like, when I saw that in dailies, I was like, oh, this is it. We are doing it. And then when he fights these the 4 Praetorian guards at the beginning of that scene, there's a wide profile 4 shot of him engaging these dudes. That's the coolest thing ever. He was such an awesome force on set, and such a fun actor to get to cut in every scene that he was in.
It felt like you chose a lot of tight shots, like you're talking about reaction
Yeah.
shots are so critical, and some of those emotional shots. It felt like with Pedro, you chose a lot of those really tight shots. Is that true? Did you find like his emotions were really helpful?
Yes. So I think it was day 1 with Pedro, day 1 or day 2. We were doing both him on the boat in the Numidian battle, and then also him at the funeral right after the naval battle. I mean, the Numidian battle. And it was his close up where it starts as a medium, and Ridley had the operator pushing into him right before he says, "Ve Victis, woe to the conquered." And it was in that take. That was like day 1 of the stuff with Pedro. I was like, we've got it. We've got it. This is awesome. He was bringing such conflict and such passion to this character, with like before he even said anything, that we knew, if you get close on him, you were going to read such a performance. So, that was absolutely part of the choice.
You had to kind of do some callbacks to the original,
Yep.
and I'm sure that there was a feeling of continuity with the original. Was there discussion? Like, did you and Claire in the Bay look every now and then, kind of look back at the original, see whether it was the color, whether it was the tone, the pacing, like you said? Was there any, or did you guys just go, we're cutting this is a brand new film. It's a new generation of fan. How much did you refer back to the original, or did you at all?
Right. So there were plenty of discussions before the show started of just how much we were going to do, where, yes, obviously people have great nostalgia, myself included, for the first movie. And we were always going to use some aspect of it. But honestly, we were making a new movie, though, because Lucius is different from Maximus, and everybody from Ridley on down to the composer and me and Claire were like, no, listen, we know we're going to lean a little bit on this stuff, but we want it to stand on its own 2 feet. That was very, very important. And then for the times when we were choosing to do the callbacks, for me personally, I always knew that I was going to try to get it so that we started the film over the Paramount logos with the sorrow cue from the first movie. That was something that I was passionate about. And when I put it in there, I was like, I think this kind of works. And then there was like a question of, oh, well, do we want to, or should it be something new with Harry Gregson Williams, our composer? And we landed on Harry kind of adapted that cue for something new, and it's kind of perfect. It's a perfect hybrid of something that Hans did with what Harry came up with, and so we were always kind of leaning toward the new, right? But then we knew that there were going to be direct callbacks to Maximus, like when Lucilla is remembering his death and the Lucius is safe stuff. That was in the script. That was there, and then there were a couple of times where, when Lucius is looking at the breastplate and stuff, that really was like, no, why don't we cut to Russell Crowe and the young boy in the first one for the Scotto and Argento? So there were very specific moments, but we were trying to make it its own thing as often as possible.
All right. So I have to ask you about, the theatrical nature of this film and kind of where we are with the movie industry. This is a theatrical movie. Like, when we talk about a movie you have to see in the theaters, Gladiator II, that's what it is, right?
Yep.
How do you feel as now, but Napoleon, right, was an Apple movie, still
Yep.
huge, big, huge action sequences.
Yep.
How do you feel as an editor, as a guy who just cut a movie that was, is doing pretty well in the theaters? How do you feel about the theatrical experience, about movies playing in theaters? Wicked is doing really well. Moana 2 is doing well. We've seen movies that can do well in the theaters. How are you feeling about people going back to the theaters?
Oh, it's super important and it's awesome. Are you kidding? Like most of my experiences, like I was saying, going to see Heat in 1995 in the theater was such a visceral, crazy experience, and I always crave that thing, like the biggest screen imaginable. And with something like Gladiator, and Ridley's vision is so massive that he should have the biggest canvas available. Like, I mean, he is one of the biggest filmmakers we have ever had, and he aims for these kind of shows sometimes. And like when I got to QC like the IMAX versions of the movie, I was like, yes, this is what we're talking about here. This is what we're all going for. Like from visual effects and sound and everything. Like it's meant for a joint like a communal experience with the audience, because that's what we all kind of want when we go to the movies together, be it a thrilling action movie or a comedy or a harrowing drama or something. That it is always about the cinema, and I am overjoyed that the Thanksgiving weekend was probably they're saying the biggest 5-day box office ever, and that's fabulous, and I hope that spurs the studios into more understanding that the audience is still there. Obviously, the streaming services have changed our lives, period, since prior to the pandemic, but especially with the pandemic, where it's a lot of people do that all the time, but they're still hungry for the big experience. And the movies that Ridley makes and some other top filmmakers are meant for this kind of experience. And I am hopeful that we can have more of that going forward, because it really is the best way to watch movies.
Have you used AI at all? And how do you feel kind of about AI invading our wonderful world of entertainment?
Right. I have not used AI on any project that I've ever worked for. Now, it's the kind of thing where it is meant to be a tool, right? And there are ways you could find a reasonable function to use AI on things and you can't really put the toothpaste back in the tube in a way. Like the technological progress is going to continue in some fashion. The drawing the line part of it is when it replaces the creativity. Like when it's replacing the art, that's just preposterous. And like that's we should not do that at all. And that's why that the writers and the actors went on strike. Part of the reason last time around, because it's so important to have these protections there to protect their work, because we're artists at the end. And the same thing that I would say about editing too. Like that we shouldn't be training AI to do the cutting. Like that's ridiculous. This is an artistic endeavor that we're doing. Now, there are word processing kind of things with AI and functional things that replace the like tedium of like spreadsheets and stuff, and doing research that there can be use there. Absolutely. But I for one am not yet interested in any artistic stuff that people are leaning on AI to do. But this is an evolving thing, and I'm not sure where it's going to land in the end, but I'm confident that it's been worthwhile to fight for the protections for artists to make sure that we're still getting to do our own creative work and be compensated for that.
Unlike the New York Times, which has sued OpenAI, there hasn't been a big lawsuit
Right.
by Netflix or Warner Brothers or Paramount. And I think for me, I'm wondering, where is the pushback? Like, and that is what worries me, is where's the support? We know people like you and your wife, Jenny, who's a writer.
Mm-hmm.
We know you guys want that, whether it's
Yes.
the compensation or more than anything, the protection.
Yes.
But where's the muscle behind the folks whose IP is being ripped off? Like, I've seen the spreadsheet.
Yep.
404 Media delivered a spreadsheet, and you see the prompting of Runway, where they're searching, they're ripping off Pixar, they're ripping off Netflix, and they're taking stuff straight from YouTube. And so, and Sora just came out, and when you watch Sora, it looks like a Discovery Channel documentary.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm just very concerned about the big, powerful corporations that we've all, you just
Yep.
Gladiators with Paramount, right? Is it
Yep.
Paramount?
Yep. That's
So
Paramount.
where is Paramount Global? David Ellison's about to take over, billionaire daddy. Why aren't they suing to stop the pillaging of the content?
Well, I'm sure that we are hopefully not far from that, just because we really are on the leading edge of seeing how this is impacting the industry at large. Now, obviously, we work in Hollywood, and money is the biggest thing, right? And so it's no shock that people want to go to the thing that saves money and makes things cheaper. But the reason why we have such strong unions in Hollywood is because we know that we are a stronger force together, and that we have to continue putting pressure on companies to have reasonable protections in place for our artists, for the labor involved. And I'm hopeful that as the concept becomes more in focus of just what the threat is, and then also what the benefit is for using technology like this, that hopefully we can find a way to kind of coexist with this technology moving forward. And it may take some legal action at some point from a studio over IP of theirs. I'm hopeful.
Okay, last question. So obviously you've done now big, huge movies. Is there anything that you're like, I'm dying to do? Would you want to cut a sitcom? You want to direct? You want to write? What is it? You want, well, is there anything on the list that you're kind of eyeing, or you really dying to do?
Well, honestly, I've always wanted to work on movies, for starters, versus TV, and not to say anything against television. I love working. I have worked in TV, and I love TV. It's fabulous. But my passion is toward movies, and it always has been. And getting to work on these type of movies, the Ridley Scott films and stuff, is the dream, right? It's the pinnacle of the things that I wanted to work on as a creative person. Now, absolutely, I went to film school to be a director, and I absolutely still have aspirations to do that. But it's more, I think, one thing at a time. Like, I realize I'm already 20 plus years into my career, and now, I've established myself quite well as an editor, and that's awesome. And I will keep doing that. But I'm always open to some new thing, be it, directing something, or on the editing side, I love all genres. And so I've done 2 big movies with Napoleon and Gladiator, but I'd also edited 5 other independent films that were in a variety of different genres, including spoof comedy, and then also a relationship drama, and a relationship thriller as well. I love all kinds of movies. And I guess my goal would get to be to work on all kinds of movies, at a certain baseline quality. I mean, that's the part of me that wants to keep working with people like Ridley Scott, the people that make the best stuff. That is what the goal is. So I don't know. I'd say one thing at a time, but I'm going to keep going on this train as long as they'll have me.
Terrific. All right, Sam, thank you so much for doing No Script, No Problem.
You got it, Steve. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Before I go, along with seeing Gladiator II, I've been catching a bunch of movies over the holidays. Here's a few thoughts on what I've seen. Honora. Mikey Madison is terrific and a budding talent for sure, but this is not a, quote, modern day Cinderella story, end quote, as I read in one review. She plays an exotic dancer who thinks she's struck it rich with an oligarch's kid. This is not a film to see with your family. I did not like the ending, but I appreciate the unique story, and Mikey Madison will definitely win some awards. A Complete Unknown. This Bob Dylan biopic is worth seeing if you like Bob Dylan, and I do. So music is terrific. Timothée Chalamet is a star. We know this. I mean, the guy's the new DiCaprio. Hopefully you don't end up in a theater full of singers like I did, where folks are basically just taking all the songs and pretending that we're doing karaoke. Overall, it feels a little bit like a musical mixed with a lot of cigarette smoking. I mean, seriously, it's very rare that you have a scene without Chalamet playing Dylan smoking. The film doesn't cover a long period of Bob Dylan's life, and that might be why I wasn't super emotionally into it. I am a huge fan of Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash biopic. And that is kind of what I was hoping for. And this is much more of a short peek into Dylan's early career. Finally, The Brutalist, 3 hours and 40 minutes long. You do get an intermission, use the restroom, grab a drink, but brutal is in the title and it is deserved. Trust me, wait till it comes to streaming. Adrian Brody will win awards for this, and he is incredible, but damn, this is long, and there's no need for a 3 hour and 40 minute movie. Everything that you normally see in an indie film, you see in this. The characters are struggling, they cry, they fight, they do heroin. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of No Script, No Problem. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, download, and rate the show with 5 stars. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Podcast, Stitcher, and TuneIn. You can also find it at Believe.com and at Believe Podcast. Follow me on social media. I'm on Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, Mastodon, Snapchat, Threads, and Facebook. You can also send me any questions you have to noscriptnoproblempodcast@gmail.com. If you're interested in advertising on the show, please contact Believe at Believe.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Steve Berkowitz for No Script, No Problem.